Today, we're going to be talking about people to people and how people go about treating people. Very interesting introduction. And my pop filter is down, so excuse all the plosives and the and sounds because I can't hear it. I don't have my headphones on right now. But I want to talk about people to people. Now, I didn't know that this thing doesn't exist anymore, which makes it more spooky and interesting. Like, what was this thing? What is people to people? That just sounds like a phrase. What is this thing? Apparently, some president, created some sort of student ambassadorship program where Americans would go overseas to Europe or Australia or Japan, all around the world, basically any place that isn't the US of A. And ambassadorship, what is the verb to use when it comes to being an ambassador? I don't know. But at the end of the day, it was just a glorified vacation for rich people, of which I wasn't, but I went on this trip. It was a fantastic trip, best trip, greatest trip, no better trip than that. Maybe with the exception of my trip to Mexico. Panama was nice too. But Europe, that was very, very interesting. First, how did I find a way to get on this trip, or where did I learn about it first? My cousin went on it, I think a year, maybe 2 years prior. She went to Europe. It was like Great Britain, France, Ireland. For whatever reason, Spain was left off the list, but there were other countries as well. This is where I first heard of this trip, and it was expensive. It was like $9,000, $10,000. And somehow I got signed up for the program along with my brother. It cost like $10,000. We got a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for, sponsors in order to pay for this trip. Me and my brother decided early on that we weren't going to go on the same trip because as brothers, we knew that if we went on the same trip, we would lean on each other for emotional support, and we kind of just gravitate toward each other. So we decided, you know what, we're going to go on completely different trips. My other cousin would eventually go on this trip as well. She went to Australia. My brother went on the same trip as my former cousin. And I went to Greece, Italy, Hungary, Germany, Czech Republic. There's one more country I know I'm missing. Austria, Germany, something like that. So it was a lot of places that I went. There was a long process that I had to go through. You had to go through interviews. I remember very vividly. It's such a dumb. I don't even know what they were doing. It's like, if you were an animal, what animal would you be? And my response was, well, I think I'd be a turtle because I don't really like doing much of anything. And your house is just right there, so it's not very difficult to. Suffice to say, the interview process was not a real thing, and basically it amounted to, do you have money to pay for this trip? Of which I didn't, but I had sponsors. Before that, we had to do a lot of charity work, community work, so that was fun as well. And during that time, you start learning about the people they're going to go on the trip with. A lot of them also being fabulously wealthy, of which I was not. But there were a lot of black people that I was very surprised at. Not to say that black people are immediately poor, because that would be discriminatory. I know it's discriminatory, that's the meme. But that was comfy. Yay, black people. Yay, black people. But yes. It was pretty interesting. But you would think that the places that I went to, whether it be Pompeii, Mount Vesuvius, Auschwitz, which is to juxtapose those two things, wow. The Berlin Wall, the Colosseum. There's a lot of places that are very interesting on the trip. But this isn't about all of those places. Any random dude can talk about that stuff. What I want to talk about is people to people. Because this trip took place over the course of one entire month. One entire month of you being with just random people. Thank you. But I haven't finished yet. So anyway, they're probably applauding the live studio audience. This is Waltz for Debbie, by the by. So really good soundtrack. Good album, rather. Live album, very great. go get it now. But the interesting thing about this trip is that you're basically stuck with, on my trip, it was 25 random people. And you kind of have to just survive and figure out how you're going to navigate this place. And it's very interesting. There are certain things that I observed that were just very, very strange, very concerning in a way. Very Lord of the Flies-esque, which sounds very dire, but let me explain. I don't think it's much of a surprise that the first person that I really talked to on the trip, which was on the plane to France, because we had to do a layover in France and then go to Greece, was actually one of the people that I actually was friends with through the entirety of the trip, along with some other people. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but she sat next to me, and we were basically within the same crew. The first night, it was like in Greece, people were crying because they were missing their family, and I was just like, suck it up. Now, granted, the age range between all of these people is pretty vast. You have people that are either freshmen or just about to be freshmen to seniors that might just be going to college. On our trip, we had one senior, one freshman, and then a lot of sophomores and juniors. I was 17 at the time. So there were a lot of sophomores and juniors. A lot of sophomores and juniors that were crying. And I was like, why? Like, why? Like, again, but it's like, I don't know. It's like, granted, you're like hundreds of thousands of miles away from your family, so I completely understand it. Me, I'm just kind of like, I hate to say it, but I didn't even call home until maybe like 5 days before I was about to come back. So, well, that was also from the counselors calling back home because somebody assaulted somebody else on the trip. That we'll get to that because that usually doesn't happen on these trips either. But on the first day of the trip, the first night rather, in Greece, the counselors, because there was 3 of them, they basically oversee all of the other children that are on the trip. They started seeing that like little groups were starting to be created, and they were going out of their way to try to stop them from forming cliques being formed, because they realized that certain people were going to be on the outside of these cliques. And that's kind of one of the things that I really kind of noticed initially, because you just kind of just gravitate towards people that you like, and it's just like you just stay in those groups. And this wasn't relegated solely to my trip. These things that I'm about to tell you are things that my brother experienced and that both of my cousins experienced as well. It's very spooky. Ask anyone who's been on a people-to-people trip, and they'll roughly tell you the same thing. When I wanted to make this years ago, it was to help people try to figure out how to navigate a people-to-people trip. But it's like there's nothing really, but given that it doesn't exist anymore, there's nothing really similar to it. There's no situation where you're going to find yourself, other than a reality TV show, where you're shipped off to a foreign country with just random people that you don't know for weeks on end. But what I saw in this situation was, if you didn't find yourself in a group, you were basically put into one. So even if you didn't want to play the game, you ended up being part of some sort of clique at the end of the day. This happened within the course of 3-4 days. My crew was basically the outsiders, which it sounds like a very fancy way of saying that we were the nerds of the group. That wasn't necessarily the case. We kind of like removed ourselves from the entire we were kind of lumped together because we didn't really fit in a group, but it wasn't like we were weird per se. We just played cards and drank Red Bull. Like that's what we kind of did. When we went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa, everyone was trying to make pictures of them knocking over the tower. Us playing cards and drinking Red Bull. That's what we did. I think we played the game President by it's like a Japanese card game. I taught them how to play it because we were playing Uno before, but it's like, yeah, we started playing like President and drinking Red Bull and whatnot. But I think one of the things that also helped our crew was that one of the members that was in it was kind of a friend of all the other groups. It sounds weird to put it this way. If you ever watch Naruto and you have like all of the clans, like the Achimichi clan, the Uchiha clan, the Uzumaki clan, it's kind of like that, where it's like you have all these little cliques, or to use a more common example, Mean Girls, where it's like you have your own little tables and whatnot, and they all kind of interact within their own sphere. But in those spheres, in this group rather, there's one person, or maybe two, that can kind of like flit and move between the groups and kind of keep the social harmony between us. Fortunately for us, the guy that was in our group. I forget what his name was. I think it was
Hanson.
The other guy's name, I don't remember either. He was a tennis player. He went by the nickname Sexual Chocolate. Sexual Chocolate. Our trip was very interesting. I mean, the two counselors were Big Mama and Pimp Mama. Again, I only remember them of their nicknames. So, yeah, it was a very interesting trip. But these clans start being... It sounds weird to say that like that, but it is. These clans start being created. And one of the things that you also learn, that I learned later when I came back from my trip, was that there's always... And this sounds really weird. If you go into any place, whether it be like a job or maybe a religious institution, a political institution, it's hard to find somebody that is universally hated. Unless it's like a pedophile or a murderer. I mean, even murderers can get can get some love. But yeah, pedophiles, rapists usually don't get much love. So that's par for the course. But generally speaking, outside of that, it's hard to find a person that everyone just does not like. And for whatever reason on these trips, again, I'm using myself, my brother, and my two cousins as examples of this. All of us had one person on the trip that was universally hated by everyone. It was the strangest thing, and that person stuck to me like glue. Because I couldn't... I'm not going to be the guy that's going to go along with the group and just basically trash this guy. So he was just kind of like, he had mental issues and whatnot. I think there was one time when he was on the trip, he debated, or at least voiced the opinion of jumping off of the boat. So there was one time we had to do like rock climbing. Obviously was not allowed on that little excursion. But on other days where he wasn't contemplating suicide and being self-loathing, and being kind of awkward and weird, he would shadow me playing Final Fantasy 1 and 2 on my PSP. PSPs were kind of big back in the day. It was kind of like the modern day cell phone, if the cell phones were ghetto. In solving Rubik's Cubes. Teaching him how to solve a Rubik's Cube. He learned that in about 5 days. I was really big into Rubik's Cube solving. Can still solve a 3x3. 5x5, not so much. 4x4, it's going to be difficult to do. But I think, that's the other thing that I did. I kind of built an identity for myself on that trip, so it would be easier just for people to kind of go like, well, he's that weird guy, or he's the guy with the braids, or he's that guy that doesn't say anything. For me, my label was, he's the guy with the cool Rasta headphones and can solve a Rubik's Cube in a minute and a half. Like, that's the identity that I built for myself. And it worked, because it's like, ordinarily I'm just a fly on the wall, but it's like, hey, Rasta Rubik's Cube guy. So that was really good. But unfortunately for me, because this guy stuck to me like glue, he was kind of ingratiated in our group. And the other people in my group kind of tolerated him, but everyone else, it was like, they didn't even want to like touch this dude. If we had to like do like some sort of dance routine or things like that, they were just like, I'm not dealing with him. Now, one of the outliers of my trip is that the clans, generally speaking, don't really like each other, and they're unified in their hatred against this one guy. But on my trip, there was a person that was universally liked by everyone. She was like, and it doesn't sound blasphemous to say this, she was like, I shouldn't even say Asian Jesus, because even you read the Bible, even people hated Jesus. Even the Pharisees hated Jesus. She was like Asian Mr. Rogers. Let's use that. So Asian Mr. Rogers, I think her name was, she's Japanese, had a great camera too. But everyone universally was of the opinion, if you didn't like, there was something wrong with you. So it was kind of like, she was the best of us. It's what we should strive to be, but we knew that we weren't that good. We were going to be awful human beings. Well, not myself, because again, I'm still friends with this guy. Wouldn't be friends later because of one thing that he said. So a lot of things take place. You have to share rooms with people. I'm basically tasked with sharing a room with him on multiple occasions because it's like, hey, you're kind of friendly with him. Nobody else wants to be in a room with him. So might as well do it. It's like, fine. Can you do it? It's like, fine, I'll do it. And a lot of interesting things take place. You have like little trysts and romances taking place. I think there's one person that had a crush on another girl on the trip, and it was the most, I can't even put it in, I can't even describe it. Like, that was the most hardcore rejection that I'd ever seen in my life. So this guy, his name, we called him Captain Canoe because he went to
Push-ups.
high school and was part of the rowing team, and he would brag about that. And we as just normal commoners thought that that was funny, so we started calling him Captain Canoe. They're laughing in the background in the audio recording. That's very great. Yeah, I thought it was a very good nickname too. But is that the end of this side? Nope. So let's talk about Captain Canoe. And he was trying to, I think her name was Satan. Her family was the one that made like the t-shirts that we wore on the trip. So they thought that they were kind of like a really big deal with regards to ingratiating themselves into this trip before we went to Europe. So he had a little crush on Satan. Sent her a letter or something. And Satan's response was something to the effect of, I really appreciate the gesture. That's very nice, but not interested. Don't ever send something like this to me ever again. I was like, dude, I know Captain Canoe is kind of just insufferable, but it's like, dude, come on. Like, dude. Like, dude. It was really bad. But yeah, he was kind of rich. His family was rich. There was another guy who was like on his third people-to-people trip. We went to his house before we went to Europe. His house, he lived in like a mansion. It's like pools. It was like near the ocean front. It was amazing. But yeah, there's other things that took place. Even the counselors didn't like this guy when it came to not Captain Canoe, and we gave that dude a lot of nicknames. Captain Canoe, Corporal Kayak, Private Paddleboat. We called him these names because he took issue with them. Guys ribbing other guys. He goes cries to mama. We come up with more nicknames. You understand how it goes. It's so mean in hindsight. But I think there was one girl on the trip who found out she was pregnant. She didn't get pregnant on the trip, but it's like she started showing a little baby bump like within like 3 weeks of the trip, and she was like crying and stuff. I was like, how am I gonna be a mom? It was so great. It was so great. But anyway, yeah, this guy is like universally hated on the trip, and everyone is kind of united in their detestation of him. Forgive my loquacious, verbose dialect, not dialect, verbiage. But then one day, I think we were in Germany or something, or was it Austria? I don't remember. Anyway, there was one day where he talks about how he was at dinner, and he was talking about how Mexicans or Hispanics ruined his life. And I was like, dude, that is just so inappropriate, because one of the people it's inappropriate in general, but one of the people that was at the table was a Mexican girl. It's like, dude, that is incredibly inappropriate. And it's like, he was going like, well, Hispanics have just basically ruined my life in general. Me as a Hispanic man, that's been his only friend on this trip so far, I had to say something about that. It's like, dude, I myself am Hispanic, and I'm like the only person on this trip that has treated you well. Like what is that about? Within like 5 minutes of that conversation, another black kid, one of the black kids that was on the trip, came into the room, and homeboy just starts beating him up and strangling him for no reason. And then like this big dude that was like a senior almost kicked the door down, and it's like, okay, we need to break up this fight. Everyone's emotions are high, and I'm just kind of like walking around. It's like, what just happened, bro? And then, what is it? Big Mama, one of the counselors, comes over and she just gives me that look, and I'm like, oh my god, you heard about it? She's like, yes, I did. You need to write down a statement about what you saw. And the dude, I think his name was Chicken, I don't know, he walks up to me just very nonchalantly. He's like, yo, can I have your PSP so I can play Final Fantasy 2? And the counselor, Big Mama, is like, sit down, shut your mouth. I write my statement. It was really bad. But then everyone's just kind of trying to figure out what's going on. And we were like sitting in like some sort of library. It was like a tiered library. Think like Beauty and the Beast staircase, and then having like a library there. It was like that. And they're wondering, it's like, what happened? And I know the entire story. So I'm just sitting there and they're like, wait a minute, this guy never talks about anything. It's like, and they're hanging on my word, and I'm like, this is kind of cool. I mean, it's not cool that a black kid got beat up, but like them hanging on my word, this is kind of Kino, pretty cool. But then I learned more information where it's like, apparently Chicken during dinner was also talking about hardcore interrogating the black guy. So there was kind of like a prequel before this this fight that took place. Eventually I get moved out of his room. I was sharing a room with him that night, and this was in that room. And basically they decide, look, we're done with this. He needs to get sent home. And it was very Brady Bunch-esque because we're all out on the patio and we can see each other all over the place. I remember there was this one girl from North Carolina just dropping chocolate from the top of the balcony to the bottom balcony and sharing candy that way and just throwing things all over the place. And people were literally cheering about this guy going home. And his room was right on the other side. It was kind of, I don't know. Something about it just didn't sit well with me at the time. Don't applaud for that. Just didn't sit well with me. But I think the thing that, and one of the other counselors had to go home with him too, so that sucked. But I think the most interesting thing about this, and we're going to talk about this right now after I flip this record, is what happened in the immediate aftermath of him getting sent home. So Chicken gets sent home. What's such cheerful music about some dude getting sent home? So he gets sent home. We're on like the last 4 or 5 days of the trip. And there's this weird, almost like odd energy on the bus, because we were riding a bus all over Europe. Because we landed in Greece, took a boat from Greece to Italy, and from then rode a bus all through Europe. So we're on the bus, and there's this awkward energy because we know that one of the counselors is gone. We know that the guy that everyone doesn't like is gone. And there's this energy where it's kind of like, it's hard to explain. It was like all of our clans were kind of united. Again, I'm on the outside of this because I was. It sounds like hands up, don't shoot. I saw this, but I wasn't witness to. This sounds very a Silent Voice-esque, where it's like everyone else was a bully, but not me. Hand on a stack of Bibles, I wasn't. I treated this guy. I was the most nice to this guy out of everyone. I mean, I was letting him use my PSP, again, ghetto cell phone at the time. That's proof of me not being a jerk to this man. But yeah, there was this energy where it was kind of like, we kind of needed that person or that thing to all universally not like in order to be unified as a group. And the reason I say that in hindsight is because of what happened next. So we basically get in our rooms in Germany. It was actually really fun because they had some MTV shows playing on the TV. And the great thing about it was like, it was reality TV shows with the subtitles in German, but the audio was in English. But because they don't speak English, they didn't have to go out of their way to censor the audio of the reality TV show. So this was like the first time of me experiencing like MTV shows with no censorship whatsoever. It was great. But okay, so we have Captain Canoe, and people didn't like Captain Canoe. I remember we were playing soccer with like 7-year-old kids, and the counselors were like, be nice to them, and they went and proceeded to just spank us in soccer. It's like, we're American, they're European, we're gonna lose. Like, that's just what's gonna happen. And he was being a jerk to the person that was sitting next to me on the plane, and it made her cry. So this wasn't like the first time that he's made somebody cry. This time, he threw something at somebody in a room. It was a freshman. I think there was like 2-3 freshmen on the trip. And there was this one sophomore on the trip that just completely debased him and just ran him down and said, nobody likes you, you're a piece of garbage, get out of here, why would you think throwing something at a girl would be okay? And he was crying. The reason I know this is because there were 2 dudes from North Carolina, 2 sophomores, came pounding on our door. It's like, what is going on? And it's like, yo, this white girl made Captain Canoe cry. And we're like, what? What do you mean he made her cry? It's like, he made her cry. And we're like, dude, that's amazing. Because we're kind of like, Captain Canoe has been kind of a, it's Captain Canoe. I mean, the fact that he has 3 nicknames that are belittling either means that we're really vicious about what we're doing or he really deserves it. Sounds so bad. Oh my god. But anyway, word spreads. We go to dinner, and he's just sitting by himself crying because he knows that nobody likes him now. And nobody's sitting next to him anymore. It was kind of like at the very tail end of this trip. It's like they created a new person not to like, so everyone was unified against him. It was kind of like that awkward energy that was on the trip just completely dissipated once a new person that was awful reared his head. It was so strange, and I felt, because I wasn't like friends with this dude, but I was like, man, this is awful. It's like, man, is this how like tribes worked back in the day, where you pick one enemy and it's like, okay, we're all unified against this one enemy, and that's how we keep the peace? That seems to be the case. Very, very tribalistic in my opinion. But afterward, we went home, we're riding the bus home, and there's this weird awkward energy again. It was like the awkward energy when we went on our bus to go to Europe, where it's like we don't know each other, we don't know anything that's going on, and you go home on the bus, and it's like, I've been in rooms, I've shared rooms with like all of the dudes on this trip, but it's kind of like, I feel like I don't even know these people anymore. It's like the adage, what happens in Europe stays in Europe. That's what the energy was. And I got off the bus, and I think I said goodbye to one of the dudes that I was friends with on the trip. And I get in my mom's car, and drive home, knowing I probably would never speak to those people again. I'm not friends with them, and that's completely okay. It was the weirdest thing. It's like, and here's the weird thing. If that trip were to happen again, where we could find all of the original people that were on that trip and go on that trip again, I could almost guarantee that I would gravitate toward those people that I was on the trip with, and everything would pick up like normal. But it's like, outside of that context, it's like, those people only existed. Those people, it's hard to explain. It's like, those friendships only existed in as much as you needed them in that situation. It's so messed up, but it's like every person on, like, again, my family had the same issue, where it's like, there are people that you have these conversations with, that you're close with, and then you immediately realize it's like, these were friendships of circumstance. No, stop. I picked the greatest record to be saying these things. But it's like, it was incredibly enlightening to just see the human, it sounds weird to say this, but the people to people interactions on this trip. There's nothing like it. I mean, there's so many other things that took place on that trip. I mean, Mount Vesuvius was great. Pompeii was great. I'm talking to the going to Auschwitz and not really putting the connection that people were killed in these concentration camps, and then speaking to a person who was a survivor of the Holocaust. Really enlightening stuff. Going to the Vatican. Oh my God, the Vatican. Seeing Michelangelo's David, great. I will say this, and I'll end it on kind of like a funny note. I remember there's this one guy on the trip that was basically criticizing some of the artwork, and the counselors were like, "Who are you to criticize masterworks of great, like, of the masters of this craft?" And I was looking at David, and I was like, "Man, his hand's a lot bigger than his cock." I went through this entire audio recording without being crass, but I was like, why are his hands so much bigger than his cock? Why? I didn't find out till I went to college when I went to art class, where apparently when it came to the statue of David, because it was seen from a distance, certain elements of the body were made to be larger to make the image look better. So the head, the feet, and the hands were made to be much larger than they actually are supposed to make it look better from a distance. So that explained the weird hand to cock ratio. But Michelangelo's David, very nice. There were a lot of dicks in Greece. And I'm not talking about the people. I'm talking about literal like statues of dicks. It was like, I remember going into a gift shop. Nothing but dicks. Oh God. Venice was nice. The gondoliers don't sing. They're not dressed up. Water's not that clean, but the city on water, really cool. Colosseum's cool. Back to the Vatican. I remember there was this one time where our counselors asked, okay, you can either go into this special area that no one has access to, or we can leave early and get lunch. And all of us decided, let's get lunch. We're so stupid. We're such dumb kids. But, what an amazing trip. I hope you've gleaned some sort of life lessons from this recording. I guess the most chiefest of them is like, it's okay to buy dicks, but don't be one. Try to try to rise above. You know what? Rise above. You know what? Just try to be the best you that you could. That sounds like so corny. Okay, Europe was great. The people's great. Don't be awful, I guess. Don't be awful.